Hello, Korok. How are you doing?
Hi, Jordan. Hey, great to see you, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to have you on, and yeah, it's good timing because hot topic at the moment, everywhere around AI and Bitcoin, and I've read a lot of your stuff and I've watched some of your stuff as well, and I was like, okay, I need to have you on and let's tackle some of this together because there's a lot of people that don't know how Bitcoin and AI will converge together.
Right,
I'm one of those people, so
right.
this is a big learning curve for me as well.
Yeah,
Um, so it's great to have you on. And for our listeners, could you just give a little bit of an insight into your background and what you're doing currently?
yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I am a professor at Texas A&M University in College Station, Texas. Gig'em. It's in Central Texas, largest university in the U.S., fastest growing in the Southwest. I teach the Bitcoin classes on campus. So I teach one in engineering, which is a computer science class for computer engineering, computer science students. And the other in the business school, which is for business students and more general business class. I also hosted a Bitcoin conference, an academic one, a few years ago. And I have a research lab on Bitcoin, which is mostly students from my class. They've kind of joined me as well as faculty. And we are currently trying to explore this integration of Bitcoin and AI. That's sort of my main project this year. I'm on sabbatical this year. Right now, I'm in the Bay Area. I'm traveling a lot throughout Texas, also California, working on mostly communicating with Bitcoin miners as well as with the AI industry. So yeah, so that's the high level. Other backgrounds. I'm an economist by training, but I've been sort of on the more technical side. So my research is right at the border of computer science and economics, and Bitcoin is squarely in that space. And I've been and I have I will probably also move all my classes online eventually, so other people can watch.
And when it comes to the classes, are they what sort of things are you going into in those classes?
Yeah, so I think the easiest way to understand is that I have a my technical class, my coding class is we basically start from scratch and build pieces of Bitcoin up from a blank page, which is really awesome that you can do that. And so we follow most of the technical books in Bitcoin, and we give them a really core understanding of the Bitcoin protocol. And we understand really how Bitcoin works and what it can do and not do. I start with some Austrian economics to get the class started, to motivate the problem, and then we focus the whole time on Bitcoin only, no other altcoins. And you'd be surprised, but there's definitely enough content. I can't actually fit it all in. I have to make some hard choices about what to exclude towards the end of the class. Um, and it's a lot of fun. And I think the coolest moment actually is when the students are able to really send their own Bitcoin transaction on mainnet with code that they wrote entirely themselves. I mean, it's really amazing, and I think it shows you just how this idea of sovereign computing, how Bitcoin is open source, and anyone with a computer can basically implement it. So it's a great. I love teaching that class. It's a great amount of fun. The second class is a business class where I don't go as deep into the technical areas. I do. I mean, I don't show any code, but I do explain how the protocol works, and then I also take a wider lens. So I discuss Bitcoin mining a lot because it's a big industry in Texas. I also do a lot on exchanges and the financialization of Bitcoin, and what's happening right now with Bitcoin levered Bitcoin equities. So it's kind of a broader conversation we have around Bitcoin.
Amazing. What got you? I'm going to take you back a little bit, but
Yeah.
what got you into Bitcoin in the first place?
Yeah, so my big moment was I was actually working during the George W. Bush White House during the financial crisis,
I read
and I
this.
guess maybe I have blood on my hands. I was part of the team that was that was working on the bank bailouts. And the good news of that is I was trying to stop the bailouts as much as we could, because my view at the time was that we did not have a good understanding of how the financial crisis was happening, and it was premature to justify excessive government intervention. And I think what I noticed during those times, there were a lot of internal battles and firefights we had inside the government. But what I primarily noticed is that the system is broken. And, I mean, and that there was just no hope to fix it. Everything was just a patchwork solution, just a Band-Aid applied after the fact. And, there are structural, fundamental reasons why the banking system, the financial system had problems. And it wasn't until I left when I discovered Bitcoin, and I didn't even take it seriously to begin with, like everyone else. I sort of thought it was, just a fringe idea, which probably it was. But it wasn't until I don't know 2015 where I really started reading the white paper and deep diving into it. It's written in a very academic context, so it was easy for me to access. I started to, I said, it would be great to have a class on this. And that's when I really, really began to dive in.
Wow.
Yeah.
I hope you don't mind, but I'm gonna dig into your time at the White House a little bit. But how was that being there and being on the inside, seeing all the pieces? You said that it is. That's how I assume it is, just putting band-aids on. But was there anything like really surprising that you noticed while you were there?
Yeah, I think so I have my own battle scars from the experience, that year and a half. That was a very, very busy time. I think the biggest idea, and I don't know if this is surprising or not, it's just it was an acute knowledge of human fallibility, of knowing that, in societies that we've designed collectively, that when we put too much power in the hands of too few people, that there will be problems. And that was the main message, I would say, the single biggest message from the year. I saw that at multiple levels. I saw that first we were constantly responding to the actions of the central bank, otherwise known as the Federal Reserve, in the U.S., both from their historical policies during from the first decade of the 2000s, and then also during their response to the financial crisis. So that was one. One was kind of coming to grips with essentially the decisions of the FOMC, the Federal Open Market Committee, over the first decade, the Greenspan era. And then the second was the government's response to the crisis, which was also an example of just limited information, limited time. I think lots of political stress, decisions happening very quickly that probably didn't fully understand the unintended consequences. And that was also a lesson in my opinion, of economic humility. And I think it was really afterwards that I really came to understand that the best writing on this topic comes from Friedrich Hayek, the Austrian economist, who was very skeptical of a government authority, central authority of any kind, for good reason, that the decisions of individuals are captured in prices that are scattered throughout the marketplace, and that excessive centralization can lead to massive problems. And thankfully, I think those are the intellectual foundations of Bitcoin as well. And I think they're very important for anyone who cares about Bitcoin or cares about finance to come to real grips with that truth. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And big fan of Hayek as well. And did I see somewhere that was he a big influence on you going to, was it Chicago?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he was. He was, I think, the first true Chicago economist. The Chicago School of Economics has meant different things, and it's changed over the years. When he was there, it was primarily the Austrian school. It was the birth of the Austrian school. There were economists like Jacob Weiner, Hayek. They had really started that tradition of, I would say, of really of a pure microeconomics of the world. So like even when they would consider how should money be created in an economy, that was based on competitive money supply. So over the years, what happened was Milton Friedman was sort of the dominant intellectual figure when I was there. I was there as an undergraduate. he was still very influential. He wasn't there at the time specifically, but his acolytes like Gary Becker, another Nobel laureate, were definitely were still there. Friedman was, I know Friedman gets some flack from the Bitcoin community because he's a monetarist, but on the microeconomic side, he was right on message, and he was right there with Hayek. And so he was still very influential intellectually to me in the Chicago School of Economics that I'm a part of. And then his descendants, Gary Becker, and then his student Edward Lazier, who was my dissertation advisor and also my boss at the Council of Economic Advisors in the White House. We were all a part of that very rich, ancient Chicago School of Economics.
Wow, it's so interesting. This is the bit that I love, is learning about the guests who come on and their background, how they actually how you got to actually landing on Bitcoin.
Right. There's one, and I just want to add one more layer that people don't really know about, that I'm actually writing about in my book. I'm writing a book right now about my time in the financial crisis, as well as placing Bitcoin in that context. I think that is extremely important. So it's, as Bitcoin grows and develops, it becomes larger and more popular. It brings in a wider group of people, but it's very important to understand our foundations and the origins. There was actually another economist. There are two of them, Kydland and Prescott. Ed Prescott was a University of Minnesota and University of Chicago economist who won the 2004 Nobel Prize in economics. And his ideas actually were extremely, extremely relevant for Bitcoin. He's sort of kind of an underdog. He passed away a few years ago. People don't really know about him, but his basic idea was that you cannot endow the central bank with the power to change the money supply. Because if you do that, they cannot commit to making consistent decisions. The example he would tell the story of a government that is bailing out people who live on the floodplain, and that the government cannot commit to not bailing them out. And what happens with homeowners is that when they know that they're going to get this bailout, they deliberately choose to build their house on the floodplain, knowing they're going to get this bailout. And so Kydland won the Nobel Prize for that idea. And it's essentially the same idea for why we should not have the FOMC picking the federal funds rate every 6 weeks, because the market, in this case Wall Street and Main Street, will respond and knowing that we're going to have an easy money policy.
Yeah. Have you just last bit on this section?
Sure.
Have you seen the new video he's a friend of mine, Joe Bryan? He goes by Satmo Joe, and it's called "What's the Problem?" So Sailor retweeted it.
Yeah, I did see the retweet. I didn't watch the whole video, but yeah, I did see the beginning at least.
I would highly recommend it.
Yeah.
It's very good at laying out the problem that we have with fiat, and then what the layers on top of that it affects. They just reminded me when you were talking there. Yeah. So let's move on a little bit. I've just got one little question I've just added in here.
Go ahead.
And it's to do with DeepSeek. I just wanted to throw this in there. What's your... Do you have an opinion on this? Is it just hype, or do you think it really will shake up the AI industry?
Yeah, so I don't want to. I guess it's still very new. We should all know that the news is still very new, and I think the question is still out there about whether do they have access to NVIDIA's GPUs or not. I think that's going to that assessment is going to make a big determination on whether this is actually any different from what we've been seeing in the AI industry so far. But I think at a first order, I actually think that there was probably an overreaction on the sell-off, and that this overall is going to be good for AI. We need more models. We need more competition in the space. Probably this will be good for NVIDIA too in the long term. So I'm not too worried about it, but again, there's very little information that's out there. So anyone who claims to have an expert opinion on this, I think, is talking their book a little bit. So I would say let's just wait and see. And I'm very optimistic about AI and its impact on in Bitcoin especially. That we can talk more about that.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, so I would say just wait and see on DeepSeek.
yeah. Sorry, I had to throw that one in there just because it
Yeah,
was relevant with the audience. But yeah, we are. This is why I wanted to just come on, is to talk about the convergence between these trans transformative technologies, I guess,
right.
of our time. Is quite exciting that we get to be part of this and see it at its infancy as well. So, how would you describe the connection between Bitcoin and AI to someone new coming into this?
Yeah, I think the biggest message I would say is that these technologies really have evolved fairly independently. And even though you might think that there are these two buzzwords out there and that they naturally touch each other, they actually don't. They have very different paths. They have different foundations. I would say broadly, I would say Bitcoin is said kind of briefly, is an application of social and distributed computing, pioneered and powered by applied cryptography. And AI, especially generative AI, which is the domain we're in now, is the application of neural networks, both on the software and then the hardware. And those are two big, fairly different areas, and they have developed fairly separately. I would say that they share they both kind of came out of the fringe. The neural networks were 10 years ago were pretty fringe, just as Bitcoin and cryptography was 15 years ago. And which is nice. I kind of like fringe technologies. But I do believe that they're both solving different problems, and I believe they both will independently be successful for different reasons. AI, I mean, and I think, again, speaking in high terms, the AI is solving the problem of machine intelligence, and Bitcoin is solving the problem of digital scarcity. Both of those are important human problems, and they both will proceed on their own. I do believe that in Bitcoin's interest, as well as AI, that there's a value from them to connect a little bit more down the future in a way that's a little more deliberate than is happening now. And I think so. I think the reason I'm starting this research is I'm trying to inspire other Bitcoiners to say this is a huge AI is a major transformation. And I think in Bitcoin we tend to ignore it a little bit. I mean, certainly not like the rest of the market. We don't embrace the rest of the market. I mean, Bitcoiners are at some level they tend to be skeptical people, and because they're skeptical of central banks and the financial system, which is great. But AI is a big space, and I think my view is that this technology is not going away, and we need Bitcoin to be the first technology to really integrate above and beyond the other coins, which are in some level they're moving quicker.
Yeah. Do you think this is a risk essentially of Bitcoin not winning that race? Yeah, AI essentially integrating more with, let's say, a stable coin or a digital fiat, whatever you want to call it, a CBDC. Do you think that is a risk?
I do think that's a risk, and this is a debate we could have, which is almost has to do with free will. To what extent we can control the future. I do think it's a risk because right now the path that we're seeing is that probably stable coins will be the biggest and most immediate application of Bitcoin with an integration with AI. I would like it to be Lightning, but it looks like, at least right now, when I see on the tech stack, it looks like stable coins and some of the altcoins are they just have more developer interest in making this integration. Now, will this, I guess, how much will this affect Bitcoin? Well, like I said, I think Bitcoin will be successful anyway. I do believe that the thesis of a scarce store of value is extremely valuable. We don't have that in the world right now, and that is extremely valuable. But I think we can reference kind of what Jack Dorsey was saying a few days ago, which is that if all we do is become digital gold, then it's not achieving the highest potential for Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin was designed, was sort of it was really the first one, right? The first technology, first cryptocurrency designed from the ground up to be digitally native. It should be an automatic integration. So I would like, but everything in life requires action by groups of committed individuals, and this is one example. So I think this is something where the Bitcoiners need to kind of rally and say this is worth fighting for.
Yeah, I'm going to dig into that point that Jack Dorsey
Yeah.
made in a minute. But just for context, when we're talking about AI and Bitcoin coming together, what do you have any real world examples of how this could look? Because it's, for a lot of people, it's hard to actually imagine how this looks because, as we said, there are two new things that we're trying to deal with.
Right. That's right. So I think what I would like to do is to back up a little bit and talk about some of the use cases of Bitcoin. And I think so let me break it down into some simple buckets. Okay. So first bucket would be store of value self custody, some kind of just long-term storage of Bitcoin. The second would be payments. And the third would be contracts. Those are the three big buckets, and I'll talk about each of them. So for store of value, in terms of using Bitcoin to simply store your wealth, I think the touch point with AI is probably the smallest there, but it's not zero. And so I think part of the reason is that the storage technology is pretty good in version 0.1 of Bitcoin. It's all Satoshi kind of thought of a lot of the core primitives, and most of the tech you need for that is actually just the supply schedule, the supply cap, and the issuing schedule. That is 99% of the value of the store of value, and so AI is not really going to affect much there. And so that's it's a hundreds of trillions of dollars of potential market cap. So like I said, I'm not too worried, because if Bitcoin fails on the other two, it will still be successful with store of value. With payments, I think payments is the next use case, medium of exchange use case, and Lightning has made a lot of inroads there, and we'll talk more about that. And I think that's where a lot of the developer attention within Bitcoin today is on getting AI agents to use Lightning, and for AI agents to have their own wallets and to be able to pay through websites, all autonomously by the Lightning Network. The most number of people today working on AI in Bitcoin are all on Lightning. The third area, which is sort of what my lab is working on, and I hope others will over time, is Bitcoin contracts or advanced Bitcoin scripts. And this is an example of more complex economic relationships between buyers and sellers, or between individuals and entire markets that are occurring on Bitcoin or on Bitcoin layers, and using Bitcoin fully for that purpose. Much of it comes from Taproot, which is the last major upgrade to Bitcoin in 2021. And that is just beginning. Taproot unlocked a huge amount of computational complexity that I think is still we're at the dawn of using all that technology. And human beings at some level are not really the main users of this complexity. I think it's almost like too much power that you really want an AI agent to be able to use it. And that's, I think, the undiscovered country.
All right, this is so interesting. This is what I've been trying to dig into as well. Can you give an example and describe exactly what do you mean by autonomous AI agent? Because I know there will be a lot of people out there.
Sure.
I understand what that looks like.
Yeah, so I think the way to think of it is simply that we're all familiar today with Claude and ChatGPT, and you're giving you're giving basically the LLM a prompt, and you say you're asking it a question, and then it gives you an answer, and then you ask it another question, you give you the answer. If you don't give it a question, it doesn't do anything; it just sits there, right? So an agent version of this is simply where the agent is able to take some actions in addition to answer your questions. And so to do that, what you have to do is you have to empower the agent with tools. And these tools really they're just really functions. And these tools allow it to take some action, like send an email, make a calendar event, do some research, negotiate for you, check on another agent's work. So these are all actions that this agent can do on its own, and where you can just provide some high level guidance. And so you could say, instead of going step by step with ChatGPT, you give one long prompt, something like, I'm trying to write a research paper on these topics. Can you research this, fact check it, make some phone calls with, a dozen experts in the field, aggregate their best knowledge into the final report, and then market it out to 100 people that I know, right? So multiple steps of 20, 30 different tasks that the agent could be able to do on its own. So that's what an autonomous AI agent should be able to do. The good news is that there's a lot of academic research on this. I mean, the knowledge of an agent is actually the foundation of all of artificial intelligence. It's been like that for 50 years. And it just turns out that now the LLMs have allowed us to unlock much of that capability.
And when throwing in Bitcoin into that situation, how does that change? What does that add to the autonomous AI agents?
Yeah, so the way I think of this is that, Bitcoin really is I think it will be, it's getting there. It will be the chief layer of value transfer in the world, because of all the properties that we know about, scarcity, immutability, censorship resistance, all the above. And because of that, we will, ultimately, a lot of commerce is going to shift to artificial agents. I mean, that's I believe my belief and my bet is that more and more economic activity will be in the hands of agents, and human beings will, maybe ultimately be the owners of the output, but the actual transactions and the actual interactions between economic actors will be these agents, almost avatars, interacting on their own, totally without the help or guidance of individuals. We will set them up humans will set them up and maybe the parameters, but they will ultimately go off on their own. And then eventually we will have entire economies of agents working with each other, and we'll need to establish some rules of the road. What do those marketplaces look like? What do property rights look like? How do you have almost like a rule of law between these agents and settling disputes and so on? So this will happen, I think, on its own. Bitcoin and Bitcoin's technology is actually very, very well suited to for this, because what Bitcoin allows now, really through Taproot and BitVM, these are some of the biggest innovations in the space, is that we can have much more complex economic relationships between these agents. And if we can then move these artificial relationships over to Bitcoin, we can use a lot of the technology within Bitcoin that's already there, and for all of this activity. Yeah.
Okay. And well, you talked about markets a little bit there. Will it create new markets that we've not necessarily seen before?
Yeah, I think there will be new markets. You mean will the agents create the markets themselves? I think we're still a ways away from that. I think most likely the medium term, my lifetime, maybe yours too, is in our lifetimes, the humans will create the environments, and the agents will participate within those environments. But then eventually with AGI, of course, you could have the agents create their own environments. But certainly there will be new opportunities for new kinds of markets. Let me give you a few examples. I actually gave, if you're curious, I gave a whole presentation on this at the MicroStrategy Bitcoin conference last May in Las Vegas, which is online on YouTube. You can find it. But if right now we do have some markets that are guided by humans but are expressed and ultimately performed by artificial agents. So an example of this, there's a class of auctions called a combinatorial auction. And these are auctions that are run for example, the government runs these auctions to auction off the airwaves. So when there's a large amount of airwaves that that you need to auction off around the world, a government can host an auction, and the bidders, even though you might think that the bidders like Sprint and T-Mobile, they don't actually bid themselves. They can bid through agents, basically. They're not LLM agents, but they are computational agents they have some parameters that that Sprint will define, and then the agents do the bidding in those auctions. Another example would be Procter and Gamble is bidding on. They need to have their goods delivered around the U.S., and so they have a network of truck routes. So all the truckers, all the carriers bid on the different routes. Now, the reason these require some computational complexity is that they are called multi-unit auctions, meaning that you're bidding not just on individual route, like the route from Chicago to New York, but on multiple routes. Chicago to New York to DC, DC back to Chicago, like a triangle. And if you're willing to do that triangle, you may be willing, because if you bid on the package, which is the three legs at once, you may be willing to bid to do that put in a more competitive bid at a lower price than if you're bidding on the three individually. And so what happens is that the computational complexity of these auctions increases because of these packages of items that you can bid on. So this is one example of an environment where agents can bid, and it can bid on multiple items at once, and it requires some computational complexity. That's just one example of the kinds of economic activity that can occur in this AI agent economy.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's hard to get your head around as well. Like,
it really is. It really is. Yeah. And so another example is, let's suppose you are, the classical economic relationship is a buyer and a seller, and they're selling something. Let's say it's a car. Car is a simple thing, right? You have a car and you're selling it to someone else. And we use markets in order to intermediate these things, but they don't always have to be markets. They can be even between networks of people, and they can be complex things like let's just say so a car might be fine for just detailing like the price of the car, but let's say it's something like a house, right? You're selling a house, and a house is more than the price of the house. If you think of a contract for a house, it includes a lot. It has a lot of dimensions. It has the price, right? Maybe the seller finances part of the house, like the financing portion. It might have some leaseback provisions. It might have other provisions for contingencies that come arise during the option contract time. So it's actually a complex contract, and we are now at the stage where we want AI agents to be able to negotiate these complex contracts with each other, and to do that negotiation autonomously. And that's where I think what we want to see happen with Bitcoin involved.
So I really liked the three buckets that you done. We were just talking about contracts there.
Yeah.
We're very much in the phase of store of value.
Right.
And it feels like the next phase is payments.
Yeah.
And contracts. But going on to payments, do you think AI agents will drive us more towards payment side of things for humans as well?
Yeah, well, I do. I actually think that, I'll give you my own prediction here. I think we're going to leapfrog the stage of humans using Lightning. Lightning's been around since 2015, and I'm a big fan of Lightning. I know it is controversial. I know some people feel like it's been a while and we haven't had the mass adoption. My view on that is simply that we haven't had the mass adoption because the real true user of Lightning is actually just being born now, which is these artificial agents.
Yeah.
And we will probably move go straight to to AI agents paying each other. And that will probably be, in my opinion, like the real use case for a medium of exchange of Bitcoin. And it makes sense, right? It makes sense because if you think about it, Bitcoin is actually kind of hard to use. It's got frankly, it's got like kind of a lousy UX. You have to deal with private keys, which is these large random numbers or QR codes, or copying and pasting these addresses. You make one mistake, your money's gone. right? So these are problems for human beings, but they're not problems for machines, right? For machines, this is how they operate. And honestly, this is where Bitcoin came from, right? Bitcoin emerged completely out of the digital space. So it's really only natural that machines should be the ultimate end user. So I'm really optimistic that machines will probably power this new era of medium of exchange, and it will open up use cases of Bitcoin that we cannot imagine yet. Yeah.
And I guess that, are you saying that pulls us along as well with it?
Yeah.
As humans.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Because ultimately, I mean, you could say there's a poetic irony here that we are essentially relying on these machines to ultimately secure our own human economic freedom, which is what Bitcoin promises. And and I think it's I sort of, I mean, my own views have shifted over the years. I think I think it's a challenge to simply advocate for Bitcoin completely um, on the end of the central bank because it's even though that may have been the origins. I think realistically, the Bitcoin community, we need to meet people where they are, and we need to provide real demonstrable value, and unlocking some of that on the technology side, that power with Bitcoin and AI, I think is the path to do that. Yeah.
And they're, so I'm going to go into the adoption side of things. I've noticed anyway, I don't know if you've noticed as well, but when you talk about AI to someone, say a business, they're very pro and they're open to it, want to discuss it, implement it, even though it could be useless, whatever
Yeah.
it is. They just want to be able to say they're moving with the times and they're implementing AI.
Sure.
Whereas you've got Bitcoin, and in the past, over the past 5-6 years that I've been in it, it's been a dirty word, and a lot of people don't want to associate with it. And I realized that both are very different and they're their own thing. But by having this convergence, do you think that helps Bitcoin when it comes to adoption and acceptance?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think people honestly have very short-term memories. And I wouldn't read too much into the fact that whatever Jamie Dimon once said, that Bitcoin's main use case is for criminals. All of that is going to change very quickly. I mean, if there's a legitimate use case with AI technology, the world can move extremely quickly and pivot very fast. And I think we should not, as a Bitcoin community, we don't need to be shy about that. We can just face that as reality. Think about what happened with smartphones, right? Did smartphones just totally changed the way people interact with technology overnight almost, and no one was lamenting why we don't use desktop computers anymore. So I think that as long as Bitcoin can provide a very, very novel use cases for new kinds of contracts and economic relationships that can be expressed digitally, then that will clear the path, I think, for value, and then we don't have to worry about sort of the original criticisms that Bitcoin might have faced. Yeah,
That's a good point. So we've talked very positively about all of it, but are you seeing any risks with specifically? Let's look at the convergence between Bitcoin and AI.
Yeah, I have this. I'll tell you the biggest challenge. I'll show you the challenge that I face in my lab, and this is something that I was not aware until I actually tried to solve this problem. Is that I think we are. The risk is that we are only as good as the tools that we have today, and it always surprises me what those tools are. So I'll give you an example. I'll give you the general argument, and I'll give you a specific case. So the general argument is that we are now living in the time of the LLMs, right? And LLMs are trained off of all human data, like on the internet. And what we're doing in my lab is we are using LLMs to negotiate contracts, and they're doing it in natural language. Okay. they're doing this in natural language because this is where we are in the cycle of technology. These LLMs have been trained, like if you think about the history of the development of the technology, we first had the transistor, personal computer, the internet, web, mobile, now LLMs, right? I mean, and this is path dependence. It's not like if you take something out of this step, nothing would work. And so we're at LLMs now because we are looking back on this entire chain of events that led us here, which means that the biggest investment dollars today in venture capital are going towards generative AI, right? And are going towards LLMs. Now, are LLMs, is natural language the best way to write complex computational contracts? Intellectually, I think the answer is no. I don't think that's right. I think if you were to solve this from an academic perspective or a scientific perspective and say, I want to utilize the full complexity of a very large tap tree, which is the tree in Taproot. It's a giant data structure that can host enormous computational complexity. Is an LLM the best way to do that? No, I don't think that's true. I think you probably wouldn't want something else. But the LLM is the best game in town now. And so it's even though the concept of neural network may not necessarily fit with the tap tree, it's the idea that we have billions, if not eventually trillions of dollars invested into making these LLMs good. And what will emerge out of that is the natural language communication between the AI agents will then transfer down into very complex transactions between different tap trees. So that is what will eventually happen. And I think the question is that optimal or not? I think maybe that's the philosophical question that we can say let's forget about that. That's kind of the way the world is moving. And so the reason I bring this, and I think this might seem like an academic point, but I face this because I'm constantly looking at the academic literature in computer science and economics, talking to other scientists and professors, and they, I think, would not naturally come to LLM agents as the vehicle for writing complex contracts. That is not the natural hammer that you would think of using. But my bet is that will be the most important tool because that is where the market is right now, and that's where the market is going. And so that's a little bit of a somewhat philosophical answer. I think another way to see this is that if you think about the evolution of electric vehicles, with Tesla pioneered, right? They needed batteries at scale. How did they get those batteries? Well, they basically bought them from companies that were making laptop batteries. They strung them together, and that was the battery for the first Roadster, right? Which I saw in Palo Alto, a long time ago. And that tells you that's a story that technology is path dependent. You kind of use the technology that you have at the time. That is just like Tesla did that with laptop batteries. So we're doing the same thing with LLM agents. So that's not kind of the standard story you hear about the doomers versus gloomers on AI. This is more, are we able to utilize this technology the best? I am confident we can, but it's there are moments when we have to realize that we are using the tools that we have available to us, and that will probably be the path to the greatest success.
Yeah, that was so interesting.
Yeah,
I realized that this is very much related to what you just talked about, but what do you think needs to happen within Bitcoin to put Bitcoin at front and center going into the next decade when it comes to AI?
Yeah, so that's a great question.
Yeah,
it's a great question. I mean, so I this is dear to my heart. I want to see Bitcoin succeed, and to me, this is the next hill to climb. Probably the biggest is we need more interest from the Bitcoin community about this problem, more acknowledgement about this. I don't actually think that we can rely just on who's in Bitcoin today. I think we need to bring new people into Bitcoin, probably from the AI communities, and essentially be ambassadors and emissaries to orange pill them, really, that the Bitcoin is the best technology for this. This to me is probably the best route. And I think what Bitcoin needs to do is we need to move a little bit more into somewhat mainstream technological circles. right now, the truth is, I mean, let me be blunt, is that the Bitcoin community is a little isolated from the main, I would say, the mainstream technological circle. So I'm in the Bay Area right now. I go to a lot of developer meetups. I'm surprised how little people know about Bitcoin. These are, full-time, very creative software developers across the stack. And none of them really, they really know no more about Bitcoin than, some flunky out of Wall Street who is just following the price. So, so
I,
there needs to be some education and outreach at that level, and so this is the project that I'm working on. I think for the next decade, I've launched something called the Bitcoin AI Institute. You can find it at bitcoinai.institute, and it's dedicated to solving this problem, which is to kind of upskill and up level the real applications of Bitcoin. I think what's happening with BitVM is some of the most interesting things happening in Bitcoin today. And I believe there will be touch points with AI that we have yet to unlock. And so, for me, my view is that this is where the future is.
it's really interesting you're working on it. I didn't realize. I'll put that link in the description below.
Great.
But
Yeah. And it's brand new. I mean, this is brand new stuff. If you go to the Institute, I will add you to my newsletter, a Bitcoin AI newsletter that I have, where I'm just kind of sharing some of the knowledge that I'm learning about this frontier technology.
yeah, I will, for one, definitely be on there. Korok, that's already 46 minutes. That's been amazing chatting with you, and it's been really good, like just getting a full rounded picture. And we didn't go into too much detail or depth, which is perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where can people find you
Yeah.
if they want to
Okay.
reach out?
Yeah, so I'm actually I'll tell you, so I'm trying to probably the best way is so I have a Substack newsletter called Principles of Bitcoin. So if you look for me on Substack, you'll find me. That's my weekly newsletter. It's not just about AI. It has all kinds of content about Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining and the Bitcoin markets and financial markets and so on. But that will, over time, that will become more and more about Bitcoin AI. I think that's the best place to find me. You can go to my website, principlesofbitcoin.com, which I will eventually move over, become like an online platform for learning more about Bitcoin, especially more of this AI technology. And then I will announce on my newsletter all of the talks I'm giving, and I'll give links to some of the lectures I'm giving. I'm presenting my research with Taproot at Stanford next month in March, and then probably at Presidio Bitcoin sometime this season in San Francisco. So so just follow me on, and then you can also follow me on Twitter, Korok Ray, KOROKRAY, and that's where I also post some of the updates on what we're doing at the lab. But Principles of Bitcoin is probably the more elaborate long form content you can get from me.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I will put, for everyone listening and watching, I will put all the links below so it's easier. I will also put your Forbes article that
Oh,
you
great!
recommend this, just because that was brilliant, like brilliantly written,
Thank
and
you.
very concise as well. Yeah, I loved it. So I think everyone needs to read that as well.
Great. I'm glad. I'm glad you were able to find you read it.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for joining me, and yeah, it was great to have you on.
Okay. Thank you, Jordan. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of the day.